is over $120. That is crazy. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I have one of the most exciting videos of the year to share with you guys. I probably do a video like this once or twice a year, and that is a drugstore high-end matchup video. Half of my face right now has some of my most affordable drugstore makeup. The other half has some of my most expensive and high-end makeup. And I want to ask you guys, before we get into the video, can you tell which side is high-end, which side is drugstore? Pause for a moment and let me know down in the comments below. Left or right? What do you guys think? I cannot wait to show you guys, especially when we get to the eyeshadow palette. The difference between the drugstore and the high-end eyeshadow palettes that I use to create these eye looks is over $120. That is crazy. Before we get into the video, special welcome if you are a new visitor here. Very happy to have you here at my channel. I hope that you enjoy this one. If you do, please be sure to subscribe to my channel before you leave and make sure notifications are turned on. And with that said, I'm dying to show you guys this makeup, so let's get into it. All right, so we're gonna kick things off with foundation. I'm gonna skip a primer today. I probably only use a primer like 50% of the time. We're gonna start with the drugstore side, and for my foundation, we are going to have the Wet n Wild Dewy Foundation face off against the Anastasia Beverly Hills Luminous Foundation. These foundations do remind me quite a bit of each other. I do think the ABH one lasts a little bit longer on me, but they both have that same lovely dewy finish. So I'm gonna use the back side of my little Wet n Wild sponge here and apply this over on the left. Hopefully this one's not too light for me. I think that it probably is going to be. That's okay. We use a lot of bronzer today. I also think the Wet n Wild one has a much stronger scent. So if you don't like makeup that has a heavy fragrance, the Wet n Wild is quite fragrant. I don't mind the smell of it. I actually like the smell of this one, the dewy one, more than I did the original Photo Focus foundation, but it does have a pretty strong smell. Okay, now with the front side of the sponge, we're gonna do my Anastasia Beverly Hills Luminous Foundation. I have the shade 250C here. I'm gonna add the tiniest bit of another shade, 160C. I have 3 shades of this foundation and I still haven't quite got my shade match just right. And I know that 250 is gonna be quite a bit darker than the Wet n Wild. So I wanna make sure the shades match so we can really compare the formulas rather than like the shade being off. But in my price breakdown, I will just give the price for one of these foundations, even though I used to. All right, so Wet n Wild foundation on this side, this one is $6, and then my ABH foundation on the right is $38. Let's move on to concealer. So on the left side of my face, we're gonna go with my Revlon Candid Concealer, and on the right, my Dior Forever Skin Concealer. I recently mentioned that these concealers do kind of remind me of each other, but again, the price difference between these two is pretty significant. So I'm gonna take the Revlon in the shade number 5, and this one is $6 at the drugstore. Kind of depends where you buy it. But last time I checked, I think I found this on Target's website and it was like $6 or $6.25. So I believe that I used to get mine for under $6 when they had it at my Walmart, but they don't have it there anymore, sadly. I'm just gonna apply this everywhere. I have some sunspots. I do have a little blemish right there. This one might be a little bit lighter than the Dior. So I'm actually gonna take a tiny bit of my number 30 just to go on top of that other shade. Make sure the shade matches similar to the Dior. I'm gonna go back to my sponge, take the drugstore side, we'll blend that in real quick. All right, now on the right side, we're gonna take my Dior concealer in the shade 1W. This one is $38. It's quite a bit more expensive. There is a lot of product inside here. This one has 0.37 ounces. The Revlon has 0.33. So a little bit more product, but considering the price difference, you really can't beat the Revlon concealer if you can get your hands on it. It's been about 3 years now, and I still don't think anything has quite beat the Revlon concealer for me. Back to that back end of the sponge. Blend this in. All right, there we are. So again, Revlon, $6 on the left and the Dior on the right at $38. So we're gonna powder things down a little bit. This I don't have a dupe for. I'm just gonna use the same powder everywhere because I just don't try out a lot of powders. I only use about 3 different powders and none of them are quite the same. So today I'm gonna use my RCMA No Color powder. I'm gonna take a little bit in the lid onto my brush and just run that across my forehead, between my brows. a little bit more. Let's set down my eyelids, run down the sides of my mouth. Let's move on to a bronzer. I am very excited about this potential dupe. This is one I just discovered today as I was going through all of my makeup and swatching a lot of different things. I came across a potential dupe for my beloved Charlotte Tilbury cream bronzer. I have the shade Fair. I love this bronzer, but it is a whopping $56. It is painfully expensive. But as I was swatching some other things in my collection, I came across this cream contour palette from e.l.f. and this shade in the top corner is very, very similar to the Charlotte Tilbury. Now, I do think this one is a slightly different formula, but this is not the creamiest, most emollient cream bronzer that I own. It's not quite as rich and buttery and creamy as like the Fenty or the Patrick Ta. It's a little bit more of a satiny cream, although not quite as kind of satiny and almost matte-like as the Charlotte Tilbury, but we're gonna try them out side by side because I have a feeling they might be close. So let's start with the e.l.f. on the left side. This one is $9, and we're gonna use this Sydney Grace brush right here. This is their foundation brush. Start just pressing that in there. Take it on the back of my hand just a little bit and just slowly build this one up. Shade-wise, as I was swatching them, these things are pretty close. In fact, let me give them, let's do a little swatch in the back of my hand. So here is the e.l.f. right there, and here is the Charlotte Tilbury right there. Maybe it's a little bit cooler in tone, but man, those are very, very close. Still working with the e.l.f. one. On this side, I'm just gonna build that up. I'm gonna take it up on my temple right here. Try and get my face to match my neck a little bit better. So I'm gonna pull that kind of down along the side of my ear, just right down that, right under my chin, to kind of tie it to the color on my neck. Very pretty. I do not use this product very often. One of you recommended it to me and I really do like it. The only thing I don't love about it is that this is really the only shade that I can use. Everything else in here is too dark or too light. So I feel like there's a lot of wasted space with this one, but this one really is fantastic. Take just a tiny bit more, go along the side of my nose. I'm gonna wipe that brush off really good. I have a clean rag here. And over to the right side, let's take my Charlotte Tilbury cream bronzer. Again, this is the Fair shade. I do really love this product. And I'm now getting to the point where I'm making a serious dent right here. I need to start going around the other edges. I just don't want to wear off the pretty imprint in the middle. So I'm going to wear this off in a really strange way because I think that swirly kind of Candyland chocolate sort of print just is so pretty, but unfortunately it just can't last forever. So we're going to take this on this side and just build this one up. Look at that, you guys. What do you know? They are pretty similar. Again, I'm going the side of my ear, just down this outer portion of my neck. I'm gonna run a little bit down below as well. Take what's left on there, run it down the side of my nose. All right, there we have it. Let me turn my ring light down a little bit. I feel like it's getting a little bright in here. What do you think? I feel like they're really, really similar. Very close. This one is a little bit more creamy, a little bit more emollient, but not much. Once they're blended onto the skin, even the finish I feel like looks pretty similar. That's a big one. $56 on the right, $9 on the left. Let's go with a blush next. So I have one of my most expensive blushes here. It is actually in a trio, but the price of this blush on its own, this is a Pat McGrath blush. This one's in the shade Divine Rose. I love this color. This is one of my favorite blushes. On its own, it's $39, but I may have found a very close dupe for it that I haven't tried out side by side before, but I have high hopes for it. It is the e.l.f. Primer Infused Blush in the shade Always Rosy. Let me just show you these two side by side. So there we have those two right there. $7 for the e.l.f. one, $39 for the Pat McGrath. Let's start with the e.l.f. I'm gonna take my Rephr number 5 brush. Actually have not used these blushes for a while. They've been very neglected. Blushes are one of those things. I have so many blushes. I love trying out new blushes, and I was going through everything. I realized my blush collection is mostly high-end, which really surprises me because I am a drugstore girl all the way, but I try out a lot of higher end blushes. And I think that's been especially true for the last year or so. So I need to get back to some of my drugstore blushes. Oh, this is a beautiful, beautiful shade. So I'm gonna wipe off that brush again. Then we're gonna dip into my Pat McGrath. I actually love mixing. Most of the time when I use this palette, I will mix these two blushes together. But today we're just gonna stick with the rosy shade. All right, there we go. What do you guys think? Do they look pretty similar? I feel like they look very, very similar. Let's move on to highlighter. So I have a good one here. This is one that I've known about for a while. I may have mentioned it a time or two. For my high end, I have the MAC highlighter in the shade Double Gleam. This one is $40. I didn't realize it was that pricey. It's a pretty pricey highlighter. And then on the other side, I have my Revlon Skin Lights highlighter in the shade Daybreak Glimmer. I think the shades of these two might be ever so slightly different. Let's give them a swatch. And I just realized I didn't swatch the blushes. Should I go back and swatch those two? Let's start with this one. So here is MAC Double Gleam right there. These are both kind of a champagne, a light champagne with a hint of gold. I think the Revlon one has a touch more gold than the MAC one does, but they're pretty similar on the skin. So there they are. You can see the Revlon one is, this thing is super intense, which I love. But before I apply those, let me just go back to the blushes. This is the e.l.f. blush in the shade Always Rosy, right there. Pat McGrath in the shade Divine Rose. Right there. Yeah, so pretty close. Maybe the Pat McGrath one's more pink, whereas this one has a touch more peach in it, but pretty darn close. All right, so let's take this highlighter. I'm gonna go with the MAC first. Am I doing this backwards? I think last time I went drugstore first. I guess it doesn't really matter. I'm gonna apply this all over my high points of my cheeks. Also going to take the tiniest bit under my brow bone before we do my brows. I actually like highlighting my brow bone before I do my eyebrows or my eyeshadow. I'm gonna go to my Revlon on the other side. Beautiful. A little bit on my brow. And let's do the Revlon here on the bridge of my nose. A little bit on the tip of my nose, and this is the MAC one on the tip of my nose and on my Cupid's bow. But there we have the side-by-side comparison. $40 on this side, $10 on this side, and that's depending where you get it. So I usually try to find this at Walmart or Target. You can find it closer to $10. I think on Ulta's website it's closer to like $14, so buy it at Walmart if you can. All right, let's move on to the brows. So this is the dupe that I did in my last dupe video. We're gonna compare the ABH Brow Freeze to the e.l.f. Brow Lift. These products are slightly different, but I like them both for different reasons. We're actually gonna use these today as like a prep step to kind of set my brows in place, and then we're gonna use a tinted brow gel. So I'm gonna take the tiniest bit of the e.l.f. on my, I actually usually rub my two fingers together and do that, but I guess I can't do that today. We're gonna run a little bit of this one through my brows, just really kind of press it in there. I'm basically just using this to comb my brows upright so that they'll stay. Once I comb them, I'm not gonna be filling them in with a pencil today. I'm just gonna use a tinted brow gel, so I wanna make sure that they stay upright, which they have a really hard time doing on their own, so. Now we're gonna take the Anastasia on the other side. I do think the Anastasia one is stickier, so I have to use a little bit less of it and be a little bit more careful with how much I put in. Otherwise they will plaster to my face and stay plastered to my face, which is kind of a look. I know that's like if you really like your eyebrows to just like look wet and upright, you can put a little bit more and have them really laminated. I guess that's kind of the word for that look, but I like mine to look a little bit more natural. All right, so the cost difference on these two, we have $6 here on the drugstore side and $23 here on the high-end side. Now let's take a tinted gel. I have my e.l.f. Wow Brow in the shade Taupe. We're gonna use that one on the drugstore side. This one is $5, so super cheap, but I do think that this one is a fantastic dupe for the one that we're gonna try on the other side that I'll get to in a sec. I don't use tinted brow gels all the time. They're probably not my preferred way of doing my brows. I really just love a pencil, but if you're looking for something really quick to just kind of give your brows a little bit of definition and color and kind of set them in place, I do really like this. It's not a very firm hold though, which is why I like putting the wax in first, because I feel like it helps my brows to stay in place better. We're gonna use on the other side the Benefit Gimme Brow. I have the shade 3. This one is $24, so pretty big price difference. I do think this one might be a tiny bit darker than the e.l.f. So hopefully this brow doesn't look too much darker than the other side. Okay, it does. Whoops. For all intents and purposes, I feel like formula-wise, these are pretty similar. I do think I like the Benefit one a tiny bit more, but for the price difference, I don't know. You judge whether you think it's worth spending $24 on the Benefit or $5 on the e.l.f. All right, brows are done. Let's move into the eyeshadow. This is the one I am the most excited to show you guys. As I was going through everything today, and I initially went into this video thinking, what is some of my most expensive makeup? And do I have drugstore alternatives for some of those things? So the first eyeshadow palette I pulled out was my Pat McGrath Mothership palette. This palette is a whopping $125. The most expensive palette that I own in my collection by far. And you guys will not believe the eyeshadows that I found to dupe this today. So I found an eyeshadow palette that has dupes for 5 of the 10 shades inside here, and it is a $3 to $4 eyeshadow palette. Can you guess what I'm talking about? Of course, it's gonna be my Wet n Wild Color Icon palette. I cannot believe that this tiny little thing right here, this is the Go Commando palette, which is one of my very favorites of these little Color Icon palettes. This has 5 shades that are very similar to the shades in the Pat McGrath. And this is the Midnight Sun palette. I love this palette. I do think there are some differences, which may not come across on camera. I think the shimmers from Pat McGrath are a little bit more sparkly and kind of dimensional. But honestly, these swatches were pretty darn close. So I think this is gonna be a lot of fun to see how these looks compare to each other. But before we begin, I will insert for you guys right here a swatch comparison so you can see how these shades are similar to each other swatched on my arm. They might not look exact, but considering the price difference, I was shocked at how similar they were, and I'm very curious to try them out on the eyes. So let's start on the left side. We're gonna go in with the Go Commando palette. I'm gonna take a little bit of this red. Initially, this is a matte kind of red shade, and we're gonna run that just right in the socket. It's a little bit darker than I typically start with. All right, I'm gonna wipe that brush off, and now we're gonna go over to the Pat McGrath side and take this red right here. This one is a little bit deeper, so I'm gonna try and be very light-handed with this shade. I'm also going to tap a little bit of the excess on the back of my hand, because I do think that this shade is a little bit more pigmented than the Wet n Wild. I'm gonna wipe that brush off again. We're gonna go back to the Wet n Wild palette. We're gonna take the brown shade right here, and I'm going to place this right in this outer corner, just on top of where we started with that red, just to deepen it up a little bit. And I'm pulling this shade about halfway in. Okay, over to the Pat McGrath. We're gonna take the light brown right there and do the same thing on this side. All right, now we're gonna take a little smudge brush. Actually, let's take this tiny little fluffy blending brush right here, also from Sydney Grace. We're gonna go back in with that first red that we used. I'm gonna take the tiniest bit on the tip of the brush. We're gonna dab a little bit of this off on the back of my hand. And I'm just gonna run this under the outer half of the lower lash line to meet up with the outer corner. I'm gonna wipe off the brush and blend that out even more. I want this to be pretty diffused. It is a darker shade, so it's gonna take a little bit of work to blend this shade out, diffuse it. Okay. Now the other side, we're gonna take that red. Actually, for this side, that red is quite a bit darker, so I'm gonna combine the red with a tiny bit of the brown that I used, and then tap them off on the back of my hand, and then run them underneath. All right, that looks great. Let's add a little bit of shimmer. We're gonna start with the copper color in the center. This is gonna go on the outer half of the lid, kind of from the center point just to almost this outer corner, although I wanna leave the outermost corner bare. It's basically just going on like this little section right there. Then over to the Pat McGrath, we're gonna take this copper. Now this shade is quite a bit more sparkly and glittery than the one from Wet n Wild. So this one might look a little bit more reflective. It's a beautiful shade. But color-wise, they're pretty close. I'm gonna take a clean finger. I'm just gonna blend out that inner edge. Now we're gonna take this gold shade right here on the inner half of the lid, leaving the inner corner open for the champagne. So this we're just gonna apply right on this inner portion of the lid. Really beautiful gold. And then with the Pat McGrath, we're gonna take this gold right here. This one again is a little bit sparklier, has a little bit more glitter in it, but pretty similar. What do you guys think so far? Not bad, right? We're gonna go back. Actually, let's take that tiny little blending brush. I'm gonna wipe that off and just run this along the edges. Blend out the edges of that shimmer. There we go. Now let's go to the inner corner. I'm gonna take my Rephr number 3 brush. We're gonna start in the Wet n Wild with the Champagne. And we're gonna take this on the inner corner and inner tear duct. I'm gonna pull that in to overlap that gold just a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna wipe that off. We're gonna go over to the Pat McGrath. I'm gonna take this shade in the top corner. This is just a basic kind of champagne. This one I think has a hint more pink in it, but it's not that noticeable. They're pretty similar. All right, there we have it. I'm just gonna shape out that outer corner. I wanna take just a tiny bit more of that red shade. First, let me just go around the edge with my sponge here. Make sure that shape is nice and round. I wanna take just a tiny bit more of that red shade. So we're gonna start with the Wet n Wild. I'm gonna take that on a smudge brush. It's just a little tiny C-shaped brush from Sydney Grace. I'm going to, actually for this one, I'm gonna take a combination of the brown and the red. And then we're gonna run this right on this outer lash line and just feather it up and in just to deepen up this outer corner a little bit more. Do the same thing on the Sydney Grace. We're gonna take a combination of the brown and the red. And same thing on this side, just. All right, there's the finished eyeshadow. Are you guys impressed? I am impressed. $125 on this side, $4 on this side, $3.12 if you buy it at Walmart. That is absolutely amazing to me. Let's move on to some mascara. So on my drugstore side, I have the e.l.f. Lash It Loud mascara. This is a $6 mascara, and on my right side, I have my Tower 28 mascara, $20 mascara. I haven't tried these out side by side, but both of them I think are very good lengthening and separating, defining mascaras. So we're gonna give those a try. I will apply them off camera, and then I will be back with you guys and we'll finish off with the lips. All right, and here are the finished eyes with mascara. Actually, the mascara looks pretty similar. Those mascaras look similar on the eyelashes. I do think the Tower 28 mascara though is one of the quickest, easiest mascaras to apply. I do think the e.l.f. one took me a little bit longer to kind of build things up and get things nice and separated. So far, I feel like things are looking pretty good. Last thing is the lip. So I have 2 lip products, and these are both new dupe discoveries for me. And 2 of the lip products that I'm sharing with you guys today that are dupes for each other are actually ones that I feel like I've neglected quite a bit lately, but I'm excited to give them a try today. But let's start with the lip liner. So I have, for my drugstore lip liner, my beloved Milani Color Statement lip liner in the shade All Natural. And then on the high end side, I have my MAC lip liner in the shade Whirl. So I want to swatch these first for you guys so you can see how they compare to each other. So there we have All Natural by Milani, and then Whirl by MAC right there. So yeah, these look completely identical. I do think the Whirl lip liner is just a little bit stiffer than the Milani, but other than that, I feel like they have a similar consistency and the shades are truly identical. As for price, the Milani lip liner is $4, the MAC lip liner is $21, so pretty big price difference. Let's start on the drugstore side. I'm going to just lightly overline, and I'm lightly gonna fill in as well because the next lip product we have is a little bit sheer. Okay, how's that look? Let's go over to the MAC side and see if we can even things out a little bit. Right, there we have the lip liner. Looks pretty similar. Let's move on to the lip stick that I have. I guess these are like a lipstick, hybrid lipstick lip gloss. On the drugstore side, I have the Revlon Super Lustrous Lip Shine. This one is in the shade Nude Illuminator. This one is $7. And then on the right side, the high-end side, I have the Persona E-Balm in the shade Meditate. So these are truly exact dupes for each other. So let's have a look at the swatches first. These are definitely more of like a lip balm sort of product. They have a little bit more of a sheer color. They give a lot of shine. There they are right there. They're super, super comfortable. And then this is the Persona one on top. So there they are. Seriously, these are exactly the same. So let's start with the Revlon one. All right, there they are. I feel like they look exactly the same. The Revlon one is $7, the Persona E-Balm is $22. And here it is, you guys. What do you think of the finished look? Side by side, we have the high-end side. Drugstore on this side. Don't they look similar? I think they look almost identical. Close up, I think maybe you can see some differences in the eyes. I'll insert a close up for you guys right here to give you a closer look. But overall, I am impressed, and you guys are going to be floored when I tell you the price difference between these two. So on my drugstore side, this entire side tallied up to $70, and the high-end side, everything you're seeing over here, tallied up to a whopping $410. That is like 7 times the price. That is astounding to me. It excites me and gives me a pit in my stomach all at the same time, because I did buy all this makeup at some point. And it just makes me question my life choices and why I even buy high-end makeup. Clearly, drugstore can get the job done. In all seriousness, this was pretty shocking even to me. I mean, I was excited to try these products out. Most of these I had not tested side by side before. A lot of these were new, as in brand new this morning discoveries for me. And the fact that we ended up with this similar of a look really surprised me. So I am very excited about this. And hopefully for those of you that maybe you've looked at someone buying something way outside of your budget, something fancy and high end, and maybe you thought to yourself, oh, if only I could buy really expensive makeup. Clearly you don't need to. There are some great affordable alternatives, and I feel like I proved that today, which I always love to do. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you thought of some of these dupes. Have you tried the high-end or the drugstore version? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, or if you have any drugstore dupes for high-end makeup to share with me, I of course would love to hear that as well. Thank you so much for stopping by today. I hope you guys are doing well. Let me give you one last reminder. If you have not yet subscribed, consider doing that before you leave, and I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye.